Hello and welcome to Wrestling with Real Estate, where we look to chokeslam all your real estate problems. I'm your host, former WWE wrestler and now Cirque du Soleil performer, and of course, multi-family real estate investor, Barri Griffiths. Now today we're joined by Emma Powell. Hey Emma, how are you doing?
Hey Barry, thanks so much for having me on. I love the whole format of your kind of sports and real estate platform that you got going on here.
Well, thank you. I'm trying to, as I mentioned off air, trying to use whatever I have, right? What limited amount that I have, I'm trying to squeeze every last bit out of it. So I appreciate that. Well, hey, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to dive into today's conversation. But do you want to introduce yourself to the listeners so they get an idea about who you are and what you've been up to?
So just real estate background. We moved to Salt Lake about 3 years ago. We were in Austin, Texas for 20 years, and my husband was laid off from his tech job. And I really liked Austin and I really wanted to stay. Like I said, we've been there 20 years. We had like the dream house we were living in, a little ranch, and we remodeled the whole house ourselves. And it was like my first real estate investment because I thought that the area was going to go commercial and that we could sell, and there was no zoning on it. So I figured we could sell it as some sort of a commercial investment. We're going to make so much money, right? And this company he was working for was just really racing for the stars, and they were going to go public and all these things. And then he got laid off and they never went public. And then we didn't exercise our options. And then we had to sell this house before we were ready. And so it wasn't like the big commercial bonanza that we thought it was going to be. So I didn't want to sell the house. I was like, God, find a job in Austin. And I was working for the local Austin rugby team at the time as their marketer. And rugby's kind of a niche industry. And I knew that we couldn't just move anywhere because I needed there to be a team. It was the first year of Major League Rugby. And there were only, I think, 7 teams that first season. And I said, so good, just pick a city that has a rugby team in it and I'll consider moving there. And like, I'm not doing Houston because, if we're in Austin, we might as well stay in Austin. I didn't want to do Seattle because I grew up there and I just can't handle all the clouds. I didn't want to do San Diego because it was too expensive. And so really our other options were Salt Lake and Denver. And I said, well, let's look in one of those. And the Salt Lake recruiter was all over it. They got him 6 interviews and something like less than a week. We drove up to Utah. He had a job offer, by the end of that week. And we went back to Austin and we just packed up the whole house and just drove away and put the house on the market and ended up selling it. So when we got to Salt Lake, it was so sudden. I was still doing a little bit of remote work for the rugby team and also for some marketing contracting for a data science startup. But I didn't want to get a job. The Salt Lake rugby team didn't have a job. The league wasn't hiring. And I just felt really frustrated and didn't know what I was going to do. But when we sold our house, we got this pile of cash and we had no debt. And we were renting. So what was I supposed to do with this pile of cash? The house prices were so much more expensive in Utah. I thought there's no way we're ever going to buy another house. Like this is it. Like, even if we put all this money in, we still can't afford this mortgage. The prices were out of control. So I started just attending business networking meetings, thinking I'd start a little like a marketing consulting business or entrepreneurial consulting. I had just graduated from college with a degree in entrepreneurial management. So I thought I could help people, small business owners who don't know how to keep their books or don't know how to market, or just they're really good like massage therapists or insurance salespeople, but they're really not good at any of the business stuff, and thought, okay, I can help out with that. So I started attending these business networking meetings and I came across a real estate one. It was like some expensive education. And I went home and I said, you know what? I got this pile of cash and I got all this time and I don't want a job. And I said, I should just finally invest in real estate. And so I started researching and got into the local networks with the real estate association meetups. And that first year, when I thought we were never going to buy another house, we bought 6 of them. So that just goes to show you the power of knowledge, of leveraging other people's experiences and having a great network, and how far that can take you once you've decided that you're ready to do something and you get in with the right people.
Yeah. Well, I can't not ask you about the rugby, right? Being Welsh, and we talked a little bit about it off air, but I didn't realize that you worked for a rugby club. But how big is rugby? I didn't realize. I know the MLS, right? The soccer, the football thing is kind of big, but not. But I thought rugby was really an unknown sport here. But maybe I'm wrong.
once the league is finished with adding the expansion teams, it'll be the largest rugby league in the world. It should be about 24 teams. So we've got 12 this season.
Okay.
Because we've expanded. This is season 4, I believe. Was opening weekend was last weekend. Austin and Salt Lake played their opening weekend, and guess who won?
Salt Lake.
Salt Lake.
Yeah.
So
Because of you, obviously.
Because of me. Because when I was in Austin, they were the best team in the nation, and now I'm here and they're not doing so well. So I'm going with that one. No, it's actually been really fun. I invested in the Salt Lake team when we moved here. Took some of that cash from the house that we sold and threw it into an investment with them. And it's been one of the most fun investments I've ever done. I don't know if I'll ever make any money off of it. It's basically buying private equity in a startup company, and just being able to get to know the team leaders, like the management, the athletes. I'm just glad to get invited to their events, right? Like it's not like we hang out or anything, but it's just fun to be there and get involved in something that I care a lot about. And I think when people talk about in real estate, when they become successful and they have lots of passive income and they have extra time and they really want to give back, I think that's something that I would really enjoy doing, is helping professional athletes be able to transition out of their athletic life and then into their career later, because you're a perfect example of that. When you're done wrestling, you're still in the prime of your life. And then now what do you do? And you have an NFL and NBA players who you think, oh, they make a lot of money, and then they injure out or age out, and they don't have the headspace to be thinking about what they're going to do after they get out of sports. Because if you spend a lot of time thinking about that stuff and planning for that, you take your eye off the ball, literally, and you are not really able to perform at the top of your game. It's extremely competitive. And if you aren't in it, heart, mind, body, soul, every drop of you, you're really not going to be able to be successful in that type of an industry. So they get out and maybe they spent their money unwisely. Maybe they didn't have great investment advisors. Maybe they just got taken advantage of. You just don't know. And then you have all of these athletes in second and third tier sports who hardly make any money at all. And they're giving up a lot of their time working part-time for these lacrosse team or rugby team or water polo, Quidditch teams. You never really know what it is. And they get out, or maybe they're minor league players, and they get out and they're young and they have to go and start a new career. And I feel like athletes especially have a mindset that makes them perfect entrepreneurs and real estate investors, especially because they don't listen when people say, oh, you can't do this hard thing. Like, you're a college hockey player and you say, I want to play in the NHL, and people make fun of you, but then you go and you do it. And so when they become professional athletes, and then later when they get out, they have really overcome a lot of those mindset blocks that most of us are still dealing with at the beginning of our real estate career. I'd love to be able to leverage that, teach them how to do this, and then turn them into a force for them going out and starting their own philanthropic causes. And it could be, the Clean Water Foundation. I have no idea what it is, but if we empower people, we can have a much bigger impact than if we're just with our one little pet charity. It's basically like making an army of giants who can go out and do some amazing things in philanthropy. So that's one thing that I would really like to get involved in eventually when I have something to teach somebody.
No, that's great, because I absolutely know about, like, when, if you're an athlete of some sort, you're focused on what you're doing, you're training to do that right, and you don't think about too much outside going on. I know that was my story. I was focused on being the world heavyweight champion because that's what I thought I was going to be, and I was working all kinds of hours, training hard, studying tape, going to events, traveling, doing all this stuff, right? And I didn't think about anything else, because why did I need it? I was going to be the world heavyweight champion. And when that didn't come to fruition and stuff came to an end before I was ready, I didn't have anything else there for me, right? I didn't have any kind of backup plan. I didn't have any plan B. I'm an athlete. What else can I do, right? Like, I can pick up dumbbells and I can pick up people. That's my line that I'd say, right? And then that's not, in the real world, that's not always that useful, right? So where do you go from there? And I think, like you said, right, showing people a way, like, and luckily I found real estate. I'm so thankful that I did, right? Because now it gives me that plan B, it gives me that options, it gives me the chance to create a life for myself, that whatever that looks like to me. But I think that could be huge for so many people, because they don't realize, right? You don't realize. And initially it doesn't need to be. Also, you could invest as well. And I think I'm a big advocate of that, is that if you're an athlete and you're making somewhat of good money and you have some disposable income to invest it passively in the deal, right? I wish I would have done that right from the start. And I could have done that, put money in some syndications or some kind of passive vehicle. And 5 years later, I would have been so much better off. I would have had some kind of income stream at that point, because when things came to a halt with WWE, I had nothing. I had some money saved, but I had no income coming in, and every month that money saved was going down, and then it could have been very easy for me to invest in that. So I completely agree with what you're saying. And I think, like you said, athletes as well, they have, you have to be used to setting goals, you have to be used to being determined, you have to be used to working hard and all this stuff, and it really does relate well to real estate investing, I think.
And when you're in the middle of that, you can't be thinking about a plan B, because if you're thinking about plan B, you're not thinking about plan A. There's that little piece of, it's kind of the burn the lifeboats type of philosophy. And for me, I don't actually run on a burn the lifeboats philosophy. I run on a, what's the worst case scenario? Let's plan for that. And then if that happens, at least and that gives me the security that I need to go out and take bigger risks, because I do know that I have this plan. But real estate, it's difficult, it's competitive, but it's not quite as limited as professional sports. And so I don't have to give every 100% drop. I can have a few drops left over to think about plan B, because how many real estate investors do you know who tell their story and then in 2008 I lost everything? A lot of people have that story. So it would be in a way stupid of me to not plan ahead for that. But with athletes, it's like, you all know in the back of your mind, this career isn't going to last forever. Even if you did become heavyweight champion of the world, what happens when you're 45 years old and you can no longer do it? You have to get out and you have to think, what am I going to do with the next phase of my life? And my thing is sometimes I'll have athletes reach out to me and say, hey, I'd love to learn more about real estate investing. And so we'll go out to lunch and we'll chat, right? No big deal. But at the same time, they're gung-ho. They want to get started, because that's just the way these athletes typically tend to be. And I say, just focus on being the best athlete that you can be, the best hockey player, the best rugby player, the best Quidditch player, and just focus on that. And when you get to the point where you're starting to think that this thing is coming to an end, you injure out, or you're just getting older, then call me, because it's here. It's here. And maybe during that time, you can throw 50 grand at a time towards some passive syndication. I usually recommend people spend about 10 to 12 hours learning about passively investing in a syndication before they do it, which is totally something that athletes can do in the off season. It's not too much, but if they were going to get started house hacking or having rentals or starting a multifamily career, they don't really have the headspace for that kind of stress that comes along with it. Throw some passive money at some things when you have some cash, spend 10 to 12 hours in the off season learning about this, and then move on. And it's not that much different than any kind of high performance professional, a bridge designer, a doctor, who has that kind of time to be figuring out how to invest in real estate. 10 or 12 hours is really all you need. And there are plenty of places where you can consume that front to back, learn a little bit about it, spend a few hours a year brushing up and learning some new things. You can get involved in some bad operators, either incompetent or dishonest. And so learning how to protect yourself from that, all sorts of resources, but that shouldn't take very long. And then you just get right back to doing the thing that you need to do at a high level, doing surgery or scoring goals.
Exactly. And I think that it's very relatable as well, like you said, from a high level athlete to a dentist, a lawyer, a doctor, right? They have a very demanding job, right? And it demands a lot out of them, both mentally and in terms of the time that they have to give to that, right? And it doesn't always make sense for them to be trying to do stuff actively, right? I'm a big fan of someone that is successful in the field and is making a lot of money. Why would you go swing a hammer on the weekend, right? And try and make flips and try and buy some, roughed up rentals and try and fix them up yourself, right? Focus on what you're good at, right? Because even if you do have somewhat of time to do it, like that mental capacity to fix everything in is really hard, right? And what are you creating for yourself? What kind of life is that at that moment, right? Just take that money, right? And you make good money, a lot of those people, and invest it passively with a group, and keep doing what you're good at. And then let someone else that's good at something else, at the real estate investing, be good at that. And then, grow both at the same time, right? Keep working hard at your job and keep growing that passive income. And it's so true what you say, because if you take the eye off the ball, right? What if you're in court one day and you're thinking about, oh, is my tenant paid this month? Or did I fix this? Or is there a leak? Or blah, blah, blah. And then you mess up the case, right? Or is it better that you just don't have to worry about that and you can focus on your case, right? So I think that's such a great point. But going back to your path, you said you started out with a chunk of money and you didn't think you could even buy one house for yourself to live in, let alone 6 houses. How were you able to do that? How were you able to buy those 6 houses?
So I'll just give props to Dave Ramsey here a little bit. He gets hated on in the investment community a lot. He did teach us a lot about self-control, delayed gratification, budgeting, and just having a lifestyle that we could save money and pay off debt, that we should be debt free. So all of those things. And I think where it really starts to fall down and where Dave Ramsey advice harmed me is because Dave Ramsey's speaking to debt addicts, if you will. Yeah. And I'm not a debt addict. I don't have a problem with buying things I can't afford and making stupid decisions on a debt is a scary, scary tool. It's a very sharp tool. But just like any good kitchen knife, as long as you learn to use it safely, it's going to give you the leverage that you need to get something done. And so when I finally realized, like, Dave Ramsey's not actually talking to me on the investment front, pay cash for a rental, debt-free business, this kind of thing. And I realized that debt is not the liability that I thought it was. It does add an element of risk to what we're investing in, but as long as it's used very carefully, we can do it. So changing that mindset that I could have debt in real estate or in a business was really the key to what allowed me to take this pile of cash from the house that we sold in Austin and convert that into 6 houses. So I originally started, I loaned the entire pile to one guy. I do not recommend doing that because it made me a basket case. And he still teases me to this day, like what a difficult passive investor I was, because I was kind of crazy about, this was a lot of money for me. And don't ever invest more than you can mentally handle investing, either the pile or the diversification. So take a pile of cash and maybe put it into a few different buckets of, I'm going to put $50,000 in this passive syndication. I'm going to put $100,000 and as earnest money partner over there. I'm going to save up $500,000 so that I can buy my way into a general partnership. And you can kind of spread the money out a little bit more. But I put too much money in one fund and was kind of crazy. Scared. But during that period of time, just changing my mindset, when I got that cash back, he actually recommended, he said, you're a renter, you really need to buy a house. So I said, well, I don't have any down payment for a house because somebody has all my money. Like, do you know that guy? Can you maybe let him know that I need to buy a house? And he sent me back the down payment for my house. And we went and bought this house that we're in right now. And over the last we've only been here 2.5 years. It's gone up in value probably 150 grand just because the market's crazy. Like, that's not normal, right? But we were really lucky that we bought this because we could refinance our down payment out of it and take another 100 grand out of it, and our payment would actually be lower. So this house here that we're living in was a fantastic investment from that standpoint, and he encouraged me to do that. And then we took the rest of the money and I bought 2 houses from a local wholesaler. And I think I put 70 grand in and to each one. And then I was able to refinance it and get most of it out, kind of like a burr. Mm-hmm. 2 houses here in Salt Lake City, which is a fantastic market. And those houses have appreciated like gangbusters, a duplex, a single family. I've got another single family in Salt Lake. And then I bought a triplex in Pocatello, Idaho. And I really love the Idaho market. And so, I had been looking to buy, I wanted to go commercial from day one. My intention was not to buy a bunch of houses. My intention was to buy an apartment complex, like a 12 unit or 20 unit, something we could afford on our own with a down payment, So we put a 14 unit under contract in my husband's hometown, right near the university where his parents taught. And the bank wouldn't give us the loan because we didn't even have a single family rental. We had nothing. And so they wanted us to go get a guarantor who had experience running these kinds of things and split the deal with that person just to get a loan. And I said, well, I better go get a few smaller things for some credibility. So we ended up not buying that 14 unit. And then we spent some money on these houses. And so then I had less down payment money and I couldn't buy it by myself either. I had more experience, but now I had less cash. And so my husband said, I thought the whole point was to learn how to use other people's money because, Dave Ramsey tells you have to not only use your own money, pay cash for the whole thing. And so getting that into that OPM, and I had read Rich Dad, Poor Dad 20 years ago. And I knew that real estate was a great thing and I wanted to be in it. It wasn't really that much of a mindset shift for me. It didn't make my brain explode or anything, but I wasn't going to go millions of dollars in debt like Kiyosaki recommended. I thought that was dumb. I'm going to do all that except the OPM thing. And then I just realized there's just it just takes forever. And Dave Ramsey always says, we build crock pots here, not microwaves. And I mean, it wasn't asking for get rich quick scheme, but what we were on was the road to get rich never. We couldn't pay off our own mortgage. We couldn't get a rental. It's just saving. And I realized I can use debt in a fairly responsible way and leverage out the cash that I have to these houses. And then once my pile of money started being left behind in all these BRRRRs, because they weren't 100% BRRRRs, they were only partial. I get some money back, but I had to leave some behind. I said, I really need to go after the commercial. And since I'm kind of out of money, I need to figure out how to use other people's money, raise capital. And what's the thing there? Syndication. You're not going to syndicate a 14 unit. I didn't know one or two people who could throw in 350 or 500 grand into a 14 unit. But I did know a lot of people who had 50 grand to throw into a 100 unit. So I knew I needed to look at bigger properties in order to be able to take all these little bits of money from bunches of little people, because I didn't know anybody that had a ton of cash. So I found a 50 unit from somebody that I knew personally. She was selling it. I met her at the RIA, and the guy ended up partnering with to buy it. I met him at a RIA, and he said, I think I can raise the capital for this. It was a little under $1 million. And I was like, that sounded like so much money at the time. And it was a lot of money at the time. And he raised most of that and manages that building with me, and he does most of the work. And that was our first commercial deal, and just getting that under the belt allowed me to go into a couple more deals. I would always put a little bit of money in, earnest money partner, floating some things, getting the wheels greased, at-risk costs. And I'm going into 3 deals currently for $0. And they're the 3 basically biggest deals I've ever done. And it'll be the first ones where I'm not putting in any of my own money. So that is how I went from being able to pay cash for like a teeny tiny rental, 1 single family or something, turning it into 6 houses, and then leveraging that experience up to being able to do commercial projects, and then eventually commercial projects with none of my own money. I wouldn't say that's a first timer type of goal. It is possible, but for me, it was easier to pave the way with having some of my own cash, which was basically from that flip that we did in Texas.
Yeah. Well, for people listening who might not understand, why is going bigger, buying apartment complexes, 50 units better than trying to buy, say, getting 50 single family homes, for example? What is the difference, and why is it better, you think?
It's better for a lot of reasons, and it's worse for a lot of reasons. I by no means am a hater on single family homes.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to pick my 2 favorite asset classes, it would be single family homes and large multifamily. And the reason for that is I think single family renters tend to have more of a homeowner mindset, and they take care of the properties a little bit more. And in my opinion, they're easier to manage. The thing is I knew to reach our financial goals of 100% passive income and quitting the W-2 and all that, we needed to have between 30 and 50 rental units that we owned on our own with no partners. And I had like 8. And I'm like this, and I was running out of money. And so it just wasn't possible for me to scale to the number of units I needed. So if I go buy a 50 unit complex with a bunch of partners, I own maybe 5 or maybe 8 of those units. But I was able to do it with partners for very little money. And so for me, it was just getting us to that goal of 30 to 50 rental units a lot faster. It's also cheaper to manage those properties because you have anything fits probably 60 to 85 units and above. You can have on-site full-time staff. Our 50 unit, we got lucky because we can't afford full-time staff there, but our property manager uses our office as his hub for that whole town because he's got an office in some other towns. So he's there all the time. And our assistant property manager lives in one of our units. And so it's like having full-time management without having full-time management. So he is there at the property quite a lot, and then he'll go off-site to go take care of other properties. But because their main focus is this property, it's actually been good. So in that case, we were lucky. Normally, I would say stick to the 60 to 85 and above if you want full-time management, and that makes it even cheaper. You'll get lower property management costs, and your payroll will all be there on site, and you can negotiate that yourself rather than just taking any third-party contractor that comes in. The uniformity of the buildings is a huge part of it. So that part has failed over and over and over, and I got 10 more in the basement. And he goes over there, he knows exactly what he's looking at, he puts it in, rather than going to look at it, assessing it, run back to Home Depot, get the wrong part, have to go back to Home Depot again. That's very inefficient. So it's not just the travel time around to the single family portfolio, especially if you've got them in different cities and have to use different property managers, different providers. It's just a lot more for you to manage. It's a lot more hands-on. It's not as passive. And then there's another reason to go bigger is because the legal fees and the maintenance on the type of fund that you need in order to crowdfund, like the $50,000 or $100,000 at a time, are pretty high. And so it doesn't really make sense on a 14 unit where you're only raising $500,000 or something like that. Those types of reporting and the SEC involvement, all that, it gets really expensive. And so you want to have something that can support not only full-time property management, but can support the fund structure that you need to be able to raise capital from truly limited partners, people who have no ownership other than the equity. They don't get to make any decisions. It's just like buying a stock in a company. That's regulated by the SEC. And they're not messing around. So you better have the right legal structure. You better be able to maintain that and report that as you need to. And that's expensive. And it just doesn't make sense for deals that are smaller than a certain size.
Yeah, well, like you said, right, it's like if you try and syndicate a 14 unit or you try and syndicate a 100 unit, the legal costs are going to be,
Pretty
not
much
that
the
different.
same.
Yeah, they might be slightly higher, but ultimately, and the 100 unit can support, 15, 20 grand for someone to draw up a PPM, as opposed to you buying a 14 unit. It really makes it tight on the return. So that's absolutely the case. And it's surprising that I think a lot of people don't realize that it's not that much more work, right, to do 100 units as opposed to 14, right? There is, and it's not the same, right? Not quite, but it's not a lot, right? It's not. What is the percentage there? 86% harder, right? It's not 80% to do 100 units as opposed to 14, right?
Let's say if you buy 100 single family homes, it's 100% hard, right? Yeah. But if you buy a 100 unit apartment complex, it's maybe 50% hard. So, so it's maybe instead of 100%, you're putting in 50% of that same effort. So yeah, it's still hard. And like you said, it's really different in certain ways. But it's not that much more work for this much more gain. And my husband actually put it really well recently, because I was stressed out about raising a bunch of money for this deal that I was going into. And it was a deal that I couldn't advertise publicly because the SEC has rules about the deal structure, what you can advertise publicly. Some of them I can, some of them I can't. And so we were looking at going into one where I had to raise a lot of money and I wasn't going to be able to advertise it. And I didn't know if I wanted to go into this deal or partner on this deal, because I didn't know if I could raise that much money from my existing network. And I said, this is just too stressful. Like I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. It's like I can't handle the stress of figuring out how to pay for stuff. And he said, well, do you remember that single family house that you bought like a year and a half ago? and how you didn't have enough money for it. You borrowed some money on a credit card. I did like part of the down payment was a cash advance on a credit card.
Yeah.
And then the monthly payments, because I had on a hard money loan, and I did the hard money loan points on a credit card. It was terrible. Like I had no cash, and because it was out here and I was waiting to refinance that house, and it overlapped, and I couldn't pay my bills. Like he was paying my electric bills, he was paying anything that could be paid inside my business out of his W-2 income, because I had just overextended myself. And it was about 3 months of really a lot of stress, just bouncing, lots of things, late payments, like just, it was a train wreck, right? And he was not happy about that situation because it was putting a lot of stress on our family, on me, and on our family budget. And he said, do you remember how stressful that was? And I said, yeah. He said, are you feeling any more or less stressed out about this massive deal than you were about that single family house? And I said, no, I was just as stressed out about that single family house as I am about these huge deals. He says, so why don't you just keep doing the huge deals? It's hard. What's the maximum level of stress before hard is just hard?
Right.
And that's a really good point. I actually felt a little better with the larger deal because I had partners. I have people who have ideas and they're just as invested in it emotionally as I am. And they bounce ideas off of them, and they come up with creative solutions, and they know people I don't know. And so it's like a collaborative problem solving instead of just being all stressed out by yourself. So for me, yes, buying a 100 unit is harder than buying a single family, but buying a 100 unit is sure a lot easier than buying 100 single families.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, let's get into some of the details on that first deal, because I'm interested. Because that's interesting that you found someone at one of these meetup events that was willing to sell you that property, right? I don't think that's that common, I would say, but right, especially a deal worth buying anyway, right? Especially something that's worth buying. So what was attractive about the deal?
Well, she and I are now in a mastermind together, and we were talking about this deal recently, and basically what happened, I didn't really know the backstory too well when I bought it, but basically what happened is she put this deal together in a joint venture, which is not a syndication in the sense that you have limited partners. It's a couple of rich guys get together, they all put money in, and then they run it together. They're all putting money in and doing the work. So she put this together, and some of the guys were not getting along. I mean, it wasn't a healthy partnership. And so they just decided it was better to get out. And in that case, it was better to get out because they did make pretty decent money off of the time that they held that. They just weren't able to complete the business plan. So there was a lot of meat left on the bone, but they were happy because they all made money and got to part ways. So that was the backstory on it. She just put on Facebook. She said, hey, I have a 50 unit in Pocatello, Idaho. Does anybody want to take a look at it? And I knew I wanted to be in apartments, and I knew I love Pocatello, right? Because my husband lives his whole family lives about an hour north of there. We're driving through it all the time. I went to my first college rugby game in Pocatello, Idaho, back in 1997. Wow. So, I mean, I knew the town fairly well. And so I asked to just look over the numbers, and they sent me a spreadsheet, and it just was like kind of rinky dink. And I thought, well, this is a 50 unit apartment complex on this tiny little spreadsheet that has 4 expenses on it. Like this is not right. So I just ran it with what I had, and it was something like a 12 cap. And I thought, okay, well, even if obviously this doesn't have enough data, obviously it's missing a lot, but let's just say it's a 9 cap, I'll buy it anyway, right? Because that's like a 7 cap area. And so I had met another person at AREA, a couple of other people who over the months that I was looking said, hey, if you ever come across something, I'll help you do the financial analysis. I'm a spreadsheet guy. So I sent it to a couple of these spreadsheet guys, and a bunch of people were interested in it. It was a good deal. They confirmed it was a good deal, but they're like, what do you need? I said, I need someone to go raise capital for it. And they weren't prepared. They just didn't have the network, or they wanted to raise the capital and then do nothing else and leave me to run it, which is dumb. Why would you leave a beginner to run something like that? And so I found a partner who said he could raise the capital for it, and he wanted to be on asset management with me, and he was really good at spreadsheets and the financial analysis. And so he was really like the whole package of what I was looking for. So he and I partnered up on that. We still own it. We've had it a little over like a year and a half now, and we're getting ready to refinance it and have about 35 of the 50 units renovated and going great. Looks a lot better. It's no longer a wart on that neighborhood, and it's been a massive learning curve. As we're figuring out what our strengths and weaknesses are and where we fill in each other's blanks. This has been an amazing opportunity, and it should yield pretty good returns for our investors, which would be the most important thing that comes out of it, because you're building up a trust with these investors that when you tell them you can do a certain return, obviously you can't guarantee anything, but you still want to live up to what you said you were going to try to do, because you want them to invest with you again.
How did you raise any money for that first deal yourself, or was it did he do everything of that?
He did most of it. We brought in a third partner to sign on the loan. He'd managed like 9 units and things like that, and he ended up raising some cash for it because it was one that we could publicly advertise. But he would talk about it at his meetups and things, and he had some people put some money into that from his network. I raised maybe $150,000 for that one, and then the two of them raised the rest of it. But it was like, the most proud you ever are, because like the first $50,000 you raise, right? It was an amazing feeling, and it was just a stranger off of LinkedIn because we could publicly advertise that deal. And he just reached out, and he said, I saw a response that you put on. It was like some big syndicator, like Rod Cleef or somebody. I responded to something he said on LinkedIn. And it was just a simple question, like, what's your why? And so in 2 sentences, I said, my husband got laid off from his tech job. And I told him, as the sole provider and father of 6 children, that I felt responsible, the position that we were in when he got laid off, because I was in no way, shape, or form able to even pay 1 month's worth of bills with the income that I was making off my photography. And I said, I will never let this happen to us again. And I recognized like my role and responsibility in at least being able to be even a backup plan. I wasn't even a backup plan at that point. And so I wrote that in a couple sentences on this post, and he texted me off LinkedIn. He said, wow, I really love your story. Would love to hear about projects that you have that you're looking for investors for. And I said, well, we happen to have one right now. And it worked out. He put in 50, and then later he put in another 50. So I guess that counts as 100. I'll take it. My partner is the one who talked him into the second one, but anyway, and he's just been a joy to work with, developing a relationship over the last year and a half of just the interactions on social media and getting to know one another. And then there's another investor. I probably can't tell this story.
Okay.
I think I can tell the story next year, because like the SEC, they put all sorts of rules on you. But there's another really good story that came out of another investor on that project, and I'll tell it later.
That's the tease for the follow-up interview to this one, right? So stay tuned for that. Well, but going back to that first investor you have, I think it's interesting. How did that first conversation that you have with him go? Because obviously you have some knowledge, you've done some real estate, right? But you're not a seasoned apartment operator, right? And you're obviously very smart and intelligent, but how did that first conversation go? How did you structure that? Because you don't want to be like, hey, I don't know anything, but at the same time you don't want to be falsifying anything to him, right? How did that conversation go with him?
This is where partners really come in handy, because even though my partner had never done a deal like this before either, he really had a good grasp on the numbers, and I have that marketing and graphic design background. And so we were able to just take a nice template that we bought and make a really beautiful pitch deck. And because of my graphic design, I brought the whole pitch deck together. I went up there and I did a full professional photo shoot on the thing, because I used to be a real estate photographer back in Austin, and just really put together a nice marketing piece for it. And then because he was doing the numbers and he had really beautiful spreadsheets and really good returns, and then he would take pitch decks from other people that he'd been getting over, and we would say, oh, this is a really good page, we should put this in our deck, and I'd recreate it with our numbers. And so that collaborative process that he and I went through to just really have our marketing package and our numbers, our underwriting tight. During that process, I learned a lot about the deal. I learned a lot about the construction. I learned a lot about the city, because when you have to go and research Pocatello, Idaho, and when you're going to put it in your pitch deck, how can you help but to learn something from that? So I had somebody who knew how to do market research, who actually offered to do me like a free analysis. because he was doing it for some other investor. And I said, hey, could I learn how to do this? And can you help me with Pocatello one? So he did one for me for Pocatello. And then my first rental house was actually in Louisville, Kentucky. So he ran me one for Louisville and Pocatello just as a favor. And then after I got that one, I was able to just recreate what he did when we got more properties in Little Rock. And you're just learning by putting the deal together, you're learning. So when somebody, the first conversation that you have, it's like, oh, I don't know anything. I don't know what I'm talking about. Well, I just spent the last 3 months or 3 weeks even. It just depends how fast these things go, putting together this pitch deck. And we'd have video calls like this where we've got the spreadsheet out and we're combing through it. I'd be sitting in his office and we're whiteboarding everything out. By then, I didn't have to say, I don't know anything. I don't know what I'm doing. It took us a long time to get that deal under contract, just because it was a kind of a strange negotiation situation. It was direct to seller, and it just took a long time. And so during that time, we were creating all of our, because nobody else was bidding on it. We were the only people looking at it. So it wasn't like we were competing against other buyers. So we were fine with it taking longer because we had to figure out what we were doing too. So when we were finally ready to start raising money, I was pretty deep into it at that point, and I could answer his questions. But even if I couldn't, I could say, hey, let's put my partner on the call. Let's have schedule a call with my partner. And you have multiple people invested in this thing as managers. They're going to back you up and fill in your blanks.
Yeah, that's cool. But it's always interesting to see how those, because those conversations can be tricky, I think, right? But what you did is pretty cool. I think creating the pitch deck is really cool, because it lays everything out for the investors, and it kind of paints that picture to them what things will look like, right? So that's really cool.
And I was starting to use slides from that pitch deck as social media content. So I'd extract one slide and I'd put it on LinkedIn. Here are our investment highlights. Because like I said, it was a 506c, so we could advertise it all we wanted and just put it on there. Here's a picture. Hey, I was up there the other day and this is my favorite picture from that photo session. And I'm just kind of dripping out content. And so by the time he reached out to me, the pitch deck was ready to go, and I was able to answer most of his questions.
Yeah, very cool. Well, that's awesome how you kind of started up thinking that you could not even buy your own house. Right now, here you are, buying 50 units and, by your own admission, I think doing much bigger deals at this point, and got a good deal flow going. So I think that's really cool. Yep. And we'll definitely have to have you back to hear that story, right? That's too much of a tease not to do it. And we can dive into some more of those other deals that you've done at that point. But as this show is called Wrestling with Real Estate, I'd like to incorporate some wrestling related real estate questions. So the first question is, what would your wrestling name be?
I'm really glad they gave me the heads up on this one coming in, because I've never even really thought about it. So I pulled up a wrestling name generator, and one of them that was on there that really appealed to me was Emma the Headshot Powell. Okay. And that got me for two reasons. One, because I used to be a photographer in real estate photography, so I did a lot of headshots for realtors. I did weddings on the weekends, so plenty of headshots for brides and grooms, and so I've spent a ton of time learning about and studying headshots. But the thing I really liked about it is because to me, it's like the headshot. It's a totally illegal move in most sports, right? Like I have a black belt, and I used to play rugby, and it's like you can't be hitting people in the head in rugby. You tackle higher than here, you're out. But in karate, there's a reason that you wear the head guard, because the head is totally in play.
Right. Yeah.
In that sport. And so I love the fact that it just shows you're just going to go in and you're just going to take out this problem full speed ahead. And that, again, there are rules that you need to follow. All right. But when it's okay, you're just going to go in and you're going to attack this thing. So I really liked that name.
Yeah, and even though it's illegal in rugby, if you can get away with it, right, you're going to do it, right?
You're recording this, right?
I've seen plenty of games when that happens. Like the referee doesn't catch everything.
He does. How can you catch everything when it's a mass and pile of bodies? But we have some pretty good friends who've had pretty serious rugby injuries, and so it can be scary down there when the referee's not catching that stuff. So I am a rule follower, which most people wouldn't know that about me. I just am very, very careful with what game I get involved in, because once I decide to do something, I'm going to follow all the rules. So I limit participating in certain things where I don't think I can have full buy-in. And so I always play a clean game. And that's just something about me that is the way I am. And I kind of make fun of people who are rule followers. You get to choose which game you're playing. You don't have to follow all the rules. You don't have to make up more rules because you think that's in the spirit of the game or any of that. Just once you decide to go for something, go for it. Follow the rules, play a clean game. Just be careful what you commit to.
Yeah, very true. So every wrestler has a special move. What is your special move in real estate?
My initial reaction is making checklists. But I don't ever want to do anything on the checklist, which is, I think, so my actual superpower would be more networking.
Okay.
So I like to look at a project, scope out the project. I call myself more of like the deal jockey because I'm not really a specialist at anything, but I'm a really good networker. And so I'm able to bring in this person, this person, this person. And like I said, on the first deal, if we're going to go back, there were people interested in doing that deal with me, but I was trying to find one person who could do most of what I needed, because otherwise you end up with a super bloated management team, too many people. And so the more people you know, the more you're able to go in and say, this guy is perfect for this role. And so I wanted to bring a group together, map out the deal, jockey the whole situation, create a lot of checklists, and then let everybody go and do what they're really good at. So I guess networking and directing. I make jokes. It's another sports joke, in crew,
Yeah.
and you got the coxswain sitting on the boat and with the megaphone, and then the crew's like, why are we hauling her weight around? She don't even do anything. She just sits there and yells at us all the time. But you have to have her on the boat or people aren't rowing in unison. And so that's a skill that I'm really looking to hone so that my teams are working together really well. And I'm still not like an expert at it, but that's something that I really enjoy and am really working on getting better at. So I can justify my dead weight on the boat.
I like that analogy. That's a cool analogy. What's been the biggest body slam you've taken in your investing career?
I've lost money on a single family house. I put earnest money down too fast. I thought I lost about $60,000 on a bad investment that I made, but I went for the headshot and chased that guy down, and he ended up paying back the loan. So that was good. I ended up getting that back. It just took about 2 years of just being relentless, dog on a bone. Got that back. So that was pretty hard when I thought that money was gone. Just felt like a total idiot, right? Like that I loaned this money out. I didn't do proper background checks. And so there's a happy ending to that story. He paid me back the loan plus the gain. So that's great. And then I remember when we were buying that 50 unit property, it took so many months to close it. And my dad died during that time. And it was right in the middle of us thinking we couldn't close it. We had so much hard earnest money and we were going to lose it all. And then my dad dying. And then my son was diagnosed with autism during that time as well, because he was just struggling with trying to figure out, what it was like to be 18 and live your life, and why he couldn't do things the way he was supposed to be doing it. So we went and got him assessed and turned out. So all of that kind of happened at the same time. And that was pretty rough. But again, that's where partners come in, because my two partners, he actually told me, he was just stay in bed. We got this under control. And I only did what I had to do for about probably 2 months of that deal, when I was dealing with all the grieving of the diagnosis and the death. And then I was able to grieve fully and then come back into play. It was almost like just being out on the injured roster, right? It was just able to come back into the game and with a clear head and just start playing again, because I took the time I needed to grieve fully.
Yeah. So was there a moment that you were standing on the top rope getting ready to jump, but you were too scared? What was it and how did you overcome it?
Every time I go into a deal, wondering if I can raise the money to pay for it. Hard earnest money is no joke. And your network, especially on private deals or a deal where it's small enough you have to do a joint venture. Like I have a 34 unit portfolio, and then we're buying a 27 unit. Those are too small to syndicate. So you got to go out and you got to meet people with big old $350,000, $500,000 that are going to invest with you. I never know if I can pay for this thing. It's very, very stressful. But at the end of the day, if the deal is good, it's hard to find a good deal, right? So if the numbers are working and the deal is working, I'm going to jump because eventually I will figure it out. And I keep having in the back of my mind, like one of these days I'm going to jump off the ropes and thinking I'll figure it out on the way down, and I'm going to crash and burn and I won't be able to pay for it. And I'll lose my hard earnest money because this kind of stuff happens to everybody in real estate. But it's just like one of those things. It's a cost of doing business. And if you don't jump when you're scared, you will miss out on the bad deal, but you'll also miss out on all the good deals. And so my goal is to have the good deals outweigh a couple of the failures that will inevitably happen if I stay at this long enough. And maybe that's a negative mindset. Maybe I should say, oh, I'm going to win at every single one of them. I think that's just naive. I'm not planning to fail, but everybody's got a war story, right? And so I don't know which one mine is going to be. Haven't yet. Like, we're still good. But that fear of knowing that I'm going to miss out on good deals if I'm too scared to take the jump.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's, like you said, just having that preparation that something might go wrong, right? It's not that you expect it to go wrong, but if you have that, if you go in thinking, okay, everything's going to be rosy, everything's going to be great, that's when you're really going to be caught out because you're not expecting anything to go.
Contingency plans. I mean, I got 6 kids. It's like packing the diaper bag. You don't need all that stuff in there, but it's happened often enough. You need most of it, and you're going to pack it. And the experience of going out with 6 kids over and over again, you kind of know how to do it well. And I think that's the same thing. You just make a contingency plan. Stuff can and will happen. You don't know what it's going to be. I spend a lot of time talking to people about share me why you lost everything. I love hearing those stories because I learned so much from their experiences. I'm the 7th kid in my family, and I learned a lot by watching my older siblings do stupid stuff, and then I didn't have to go do the same stupid stuff.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. Yeah, reuse other people's mistakes rather than your own.
Yep.
Well, hey Emma, thank you so much for making the time today. I really appreciate it. Really cool story. Really enjoyed talking to you today. But before we go, if people want to reach out and get in touch to you, or if they want to find out what else you've got going on, how can they do so?
I am LinkedIn and Facebook, Emma Powell 28. On Instagram, that's my fun one. I'm Passive Income Adventures over there, and we just document fun stuff that we do, as we get in our passive income journey going. And then my website is highrise.group. And on my website, you can see some of our portfolio and learn a little bit about multifamily real estate, but you can also schedule a call on my calendar, and you can sign up to get notified when we have deals coming in, so that the deals I'm not allowed to talk about, you can only talk about them with people that you already know. And so they have to make the relationship with you before the deal comes through, because once you get that deal, you can no longer bring new people into it. So you have to create those relationships in advance. And so I always encourage people to reach out. Let's have a conversation. If you want to be a limited partner, earnest money partner, it's really important to get that taken care of before we find a deal.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, hey, thank you so much for making the time today. Really appreciate it. Really great hearing your story and what you've been up to, and definitely excited for the follow-up to this one. So very cool. Well, thank you so much, Emma. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks so much, Barry. Appreciate you having me on.